So let's say you're an atheist who has Christian friends or a Christian who has atheist friends. How do you deal with your differences? Do you let conversations about them come up rarely and naturally with the main goal being to understand each other better? Or do you assume you have right answers that should be obvious to everybody, assume your friends think you're stupid if they don't agree with you, and treat every conversation as an opportunity to change their mind? I know which one I'd suggest, but let's hear what Greg Koukl says when asked about this.
Yeah, I had a question.
Okay.
So I've got 6 friends who are all atheists. They're all they're my closest friends. They're pretty militant atheists, and they have been for a few years. They think Christianity is dumb. They think it's not logical, and I think part of that's because of the colleges they went to and what they've been exposed to, etc. And I'm trying to see the best approach I can take to start witnessing to them and evangelizing to them.
So if I were offering advice here, I'd first suggest not calling them militant atheists. I mean, they might be militant in some way. I don't know them. But to be perfectly frank, I'm not sure whether this caller's in a great position to judge this himself. He's dealing with people who disagree with him on something he feels pretty strongly about, so it's going to be easy for him to think they're more belligerent than they really are. And I'm not even going to get into how Christianity exacerbates this problem with its demands for universal reverence and respect. Let's just leave it at not calling your friends militant. Rehearsing that word in your head isn't good for your attitude, and using it on a broadcast phone call isn't good for your friendships. Now, if you do think they're behaving aggressively, identify exactly what behavior makes you feel that way and address it. Maybe you'll realize you're overreacting, or maybe you'll find you're justified. If you are justified, you can constructively address the specific behavior with them. This will be a lot better than just running to fellow Christians and broadly painting them with a negative term. The same goes for saying they think Christianity is dumb. Have they said it's dumb? Or are you just putting this wording in their mouths because they don't believe in Christianity? Again, care with language is important if you're looking to maintain and improve friendships. Finally, you might want to rethink your end goal with these friends. The more you come at them trying to evangelize, the more likely you are just to drive them away, or at least inhibit conversation. Whether you're a Christian, an atheist, or an Amway salesman, nobody's going to enjoy talking to you if you always have an agenda. So if these are your friends, just enjoy their company. Talk about the many other things friends can talk about, and let conversation about religion come up organically, and I mean actually organically, being satisfied with a chance for everybody to understand each other a little better. Whether or not you realize it, it's going to be incredibly obvious to them if every conversation is foreplay and you're just waiting for the chance to get to Jesus.
I'm newer to Apologetics, and I love it so far.
Oh, good.
I've got your books, Frank Turek's, Lee Strobel, J. Warner Wallace, pretty much all the big names, which are all awesome individuals, and I love their books so far.
If you're at all impressed by those people's books, you're almost certainly unprepared for conversation with atheists. And I don't say that to be rude or hyperbolic. There are cases where both sides of the argument are legitimate and deserve consideration doesn't apply, and this is definitely one of them. Apologists like those cast the entire conversation in such absurdly simplified terms it comes off as cynical, and I thought the same thing for most of my adult Christian life. So when you talk to an actual atheist, you're either going to be blindsided by the actual conversation, or frustrated when they don't follow the script these books predict.
I'm just trying to determine what's the best approach.
Well,
Should I wait until I have pretty much every single argument down really well?
If you think this is in any way a desirable way to prepare for conversation with your friends, you're probably not looking for a fluid, open-ended conversation where everybody comes to understand each other better. You're looking to checkmate them with what will be an open and shut case for your side. The pursuit of this won't be helpful in maintaining friendships, and the expectation of it is going to frustrate you and make you obnoxious to people you talk to, probably including a lot of sensible Christians.
And should I do it one friend at a time, one-on-one? I'm not sure where to start.
I'd start by not being so conniving that you weigh the benefits of a divide-and-conquer strategy against your own friends. So anyway, that's been some of my advice so far. Now let's see what Greg Koukl has to offer.
Okay, those are all great questions. First of all, I tip my hat to you. You have a bunch of atheist friends. You have, what do they call it, a target-rich environment there, and so that's great.
Considering your friends' targets is never great. Rough start there, Koukl.
And I hope that the way that you're comporting yourself and living your life, and I'm pretty confident of this, is going to be noble and commend Christianity to them.
Now, this might be better, but it depends on what he means. On one hand, it sounds similar to one of the first pieces of advice I'd give to an atheist, which is to just be a good person and not keep forcing the conversation. If Christians can see you as a decent, normal, responsible person who can live alongside them without constantly shoehorning arguments about religion into the conversation, you can do a lot to undermine their stereotypes of atheists and of people from the world in general. Basically, you're humanizing the other in their mind. If that's what Greg's talking about doing, then great. I think it's good for Christians to show their humanity and break down the stereotypes some atheists might have of believers. As long as the point being made is that we're all human and a person's character doesn't hinge on belief or disbelief in a specific religion, then great. But on the other hand, Greg might mean something very different when he talks about commending Christianity to atheists. He might mean that if a caller lives a good life as a believer, he'll be proving that Christianity can change a person's life. This is at direct odds with the point I'm trying to make, in that it's trying to suggest that to some extent character does hinge on religious belief in his religion to be specific. When I try to show Christians I'm, hopefully, a decent person, I'm not trying to prove they need atheism to make their lives better. I'm largely trying to undermine their narrative that other people need Christianity to improve their lives. I'm not sure which of these Greg is going for. I suspect the second is at least being insinuated, since that's such a common theme of Christianity and, to be blunt, it sounds like something Greg would suggest. But either way, it's important to be aware of the distinction between these goals and to shoot for the first instead of the second.
So you're not sending out any negative signals, but and you're also doing a great job in boning up on the information. All the people you mentioned are great people to read, and there's a lot more out there. So you're doing a great job. Good for you.
Ooh. The fact that Greg recommends reading Turek, Strobel, and Warner Wallace isn't a good sign. It suggests either that he's a charlatan who uses conversations like these to sell something, or that he's utterly unqualified to have his own conversation with an atheist, much less give others advice on having one. Maybe a little of both. My first time listening, this pretty much telegraphed that the main substance of this call would be Greg suggesting that the caller could dumbfound his friends by whipping silly apologetics at them. So I guess let's see if that happens, huh?
Let me ask you this. Have you read
Thank
the
you.
Tactics book yet?
And he's already selling something.
I am reading it right now. I haven't finished yet. I'm
Okay.
currently reading that one, and I don't have enough faith to be an atheist at the same time.
Oh boy. If you think it takes faith to be an atheist, then my next piece of advice would be to go into your next conversation with your friends ready to hear them clarify what their position actually is. If you want to insist that Frank Turek can sum up their perspective or its implications better than they can, that is your right, but you're going to be in for some rough conversations.
Okay, no,
I'm getting
dynamite.
through it, yeah.
Because what I'm going to be suggesting to you is a tactical approach, okay? And this is always the best way to start any conversation with people who are hostile in terms of their ideology. They may be very nice to you, but and as friends, but still their ideas are hostile, okay? And to your ideas, or they are hostile to your ideas, whatever.
No, not whatever. Whatever is for when you're somewhat in the neighborhood of the right idea but don't want to piddle over the phrasing. It doesn't cover poisoning your caller with the idea that his friends disagreeing with his religion makes them hostile, even if it's to his beliefs and not to him personally. If a Christian can disagree with atheists without being hostile about it, they should see how atheists can do the same. Recognizing this will do a lot to improve conversations and relationships. Now maybe Koukl only meant hostile in the sense of at odds with the idea, but that's some loose terminology with some pretty easily misunderstood insinuations.
And that
Right.
there's a tremendous amount of safety in questions. And this specific challenge, when atheists say that Christians are stupid or it's irrational,
This tells me a lot about what Koukl's trying to do. If he were qualified to, and intended to, give constructive conversational advice, he would have pushed back on the caller's claim that his friends are militant and think his religion is dumb. He wouldn't fan the flames by talking about atheists saying Christians are stupid. As we proceed, we'll see him continue to egg his caller on instead of, being helpful in any way.
This is one that I've faced before, and there's a very simple question to ask at this point. And maybe you have asked it and they've responded. I'd like to hear what they had to say. But lots of people who are atheists think that the atheists are the smart guys. In fact, one famous atheist, Daniel Dennett, refers to atheists as the brights, like the brights, the smart people, right? It's kind of self-serving, it seems to me, and the religious people are the dim bulbs, kind of thing. All right, fine. Tell me, this is the question I would ask: what is dumb or irrational about Christianity?
Is it just me, or does it sound like Greg is trying to make things worse here? He suggests his caller ask his friends a totally loaded question, that being what's dumb or irrational about Christianity. But if that weren't bad enough, he first primes him with a not entirely true anecdote about Daniel Dennett coming up with the term brights, in which he insinuates that Dennett is calling religious people dim bulbs by comparison. Now let's be clear, I'm not a fan of the term brights. I personally do think it sounds self-aggrandizing and a little condescending. But we should still be fair about the intent of people who do use the term. It isn't specifically describing atheists for one thing, and Dennett, who didn't even invent the term by the way, explicitly said religious people aren't dim by comparison, and suggested they come up with their own positive word for themselves if they wanted. So not only is Koukl just making up this whole dim bulb thing, but he could have discovered Dennett explicitly disavowed the term if he'd done the most basic due diligence before insinuating that's what he meant. But let's just say this all is true, though. Let's say Dennett is a total jerk who thinks atheists are brights and Christians are dim. What's the point of bringing this up before suggesting the caller ask his friends what they think is dumb about Christianity? The net effect, if not the intent, is to let the suggestion that Christians as people are dim bleed into the loaded question about Christianity as a concept being dumb, projecting the rumor about what Dennett said onto the caller's friends. It's really sleazy and sounds like Koukl is trying to make the conversation go sideways. Here's what I'd suggest instead. Rather than asking what they think is dumb about Christianity, maybe ask your friends if they think Christianity is dumb. If they say yes, that opens up a whole other conversation. If they say no, then you can proceed to ask why they find your religion unbelievable. I mean, they might think it's incorrect, maybe even irrational in places. But we are all incorrect or irrational at times. That doesn't make us dumb. So if a person points out where you're being incorrect or irrational and you immediately ascribe accusations of being dumb to their observation, you're becoming obnoxiously defensive and simply refusing to hear constructive criticisms they might have of you. Maybe that's what Greg's trying to get his caller to do. I'm not 100% sure, but it kind of sounds like it.
What is dumb or irrational about Christianity? And now you want specifics. You want them to spell it out. And this is just an example of the first Columbo question. What do you mean by that? It's just a variation. Okay. So if you were to say to your friends, Ross, what is stupid, I guess is the word they use. Oh, they use the S word. Oh, naughty, naughty.
Did they? I'm still not sure about that. The caller never claimed they used the S word, and in fact never described them as saying anything at all. He just said they think Christianity is dumb, and at no point did the word stupid enter the conversation until Greg brought it there. The fact that Greg actually escalates the situation like this shows he's either incapable of guiding this person to a more constructive conversation with his friends or is simply uninterested in doing so. The most charitable thing I can read into this is that something about the word stupid was in the summary given to Greg by his call screeners. But even then, it seems like Greg could have asked some probing questions to find out if they actually said or did anything to show they think Christianity is stupid. In either case, he seems to be more interested in dumping fuel on the fire than in trying to improve this guy's relationship with his friends. I don't know. It's almost like Greg's selective about when he uses this Columbo method to get to the bottom of things.
What is stupid about Christianity? What do you think they'd say?
They'd probably just say, oh, look at all the evil in the world. Like God can't, or a man can't walk on water. Just kind of the typical slogan-y, atheistic responses, basically.
This would be a wonderful time for Greg to ask why he suspects they'd give typical slogan-y atheistic responses, and whether this kind of loaded language is the best way to describe what they'd say. Instead, he just climbs right down into the mud with his collar and runs with his narrative.
Okay, let's just take one at a time. Okay. According to the Christian worldview, it's a magical world. Okay? If God exists, if there is a God, wouldn't something like that be possible? Walking on water?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, of course it would be possible.
Yeah. If a God existed, stuff like that would be possible. Just like if Superman existed, it would be possible for him to fly and lift cars over his head. That goes without saying, basically by definition, but it's not a worthwhile point.
Okay, so the real question is whether there's a God or not. Okay, so now what you've done is you've deflected, parried, that was the word I was looking for with the other caller, with the sword.
Oops, you accidentally said what you meant the first time. But nice catch.
You parry the condescension. Oh, people walk on water. Nobody can do that. Well, no, not in your world. But in God's world, yes, they could. Okay, now the question is, which world is the true world?
Yeah, that is the question. And to determine what kind of world you live in, you spend your life observing it. Since this caller's friends spent their lives observing a world where people don't walk on water, it's just reasonable for them to be skeptical of claims that someone did. This isn't condescension, as Koukl said, continuing to provoke his caller against his own friends. It's just a reasonable observation.
So now you've moved it to a different discussion that's more fruitful, whether or not God exists. Okay, so you've moved the issue to something substantive, okay?
Literally, you've changed the subject. Or, as Greg said previously before correcting his Freudian slip, deflected.
Now, they also raise the issue about the question of evil, okay? Now, I've just been working on this the last few days in this book I'm writing.
Oh, I'm sure you have. And I bet in doing so, you totally blazed trails into fresh, unexplored territory instead of just retyping something stupid 1,000 other apologists have already said about how atheists don't have a basis for evil.
So the question, now here's the question. They think the problem of evil is a problem for Christians. It is not. It's a problem for the atheist.
Yep, here we go.
And I'll see if I can show you this very quickly, because the question I'm going to ask is, when they say the problem of evil, so you believe there's real evil in the world? Yes, I do, obviously, they're going to say.
Or they're obviously going to notice that you're setting a ridiculous Wile E. Coyote-style trap for them in hopes they're too naive to call you out for conflating evil as a literal force with evil as an abstract concept.
Okay. Now, the next question is really important. Are you saying that there's evil out there, that things people do are actually evil? Or are you just saying there are things that you don't like? Now, Ross, that's the difference between objective evil or morality and subjective morality or relativism, okay? You just want to get clear. All we're doing is getting clear on their idea. Do you think there are really, real, actual evil things in the world? Okay, that's what I want to know.
This is just such tired garbage. Evil is a word for a type of action or attitude, usually one that causes or relishes horrible harm to people. The existence of a God does literally nothing to make this concept more objective. It just gives theists an avenue for redefining the word in an arbitrary way that creates a circular argument for their belief, while doing nothing more than kicking existing philosophical or definitional problems up to a God and pretending that made them go away.
Now, when people raise the problem of evil, they actually usually mean there's evil in the world. Okay? Even the atheist says that. Look at those things. Look at the shootings. Look at this. Look at all the genocide. Look at all that stuff. Look at all that bad stuff. How could God allow all of that? Okay.
Right.
See? Every single example he gives aligns with my definition of evil as horrible harm to people. It's almost like I have a good working definition of evil that God isn't at all necessary for.
Okay, so fine. Let's say, okay, this is another move here at this point. Now that you've clarified that they believe in objective evil, those things are actually bad. Okay, fine. So you're an atheist, right? So notice I'm role-playing here. I'm role-playing both sides. for the sake of time.
Yep.
Oh, thanks for clarifying. I have no concept of abstract language, so here I was all confused about why you kept switching between being a Christian and an atheist in the middle of a phone call.
So you're an atheist. Yeah, right. So let's just say there is no God. Okay. Are those evil things still happening? All this stuff you just described, all these school shootings and the genocide and all these and all that stuff, it still happens, right? Yeah. Okay. So there's no God, but all these evil things are happening. Explain to me how those things can be evil if there is no God.
Because definitionally, I use the word evil to describe those actions and the harm they cause. Greg's question is as silly as asking me how I can be tall if there is no God. People generally use the word tall to describe a human who's 6'3", and they generally use the word evil to describe actions that cause horrible harm. It's pretty asinine to suspect people can't notice an abstract concept and come up for a word with it unless God exists, so Greg's really not being helpful here.
That's the question. Explain to me how those things can be evil in the way you're talking about them if there is no God. Now, they might say, wait, I don't get what you're after.
No, they'll know what you're after.
Okay, wait a minute. You said these things are evil, right? Yeah. That means they broke a rule. They shouldn't have done what they did. There's some rule of goodness that they didn't abide by. They broke a law. That's what it means to be evil, right?
Wrong. A law can stop evil, but it can also prescribe something mundane or even evil itself. That's why we might use the word evil to describe things like murder, torture, or child abuse, while we generally wouldn't use it to describe going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, and certainly not for failing to turn someone over to the 1940s German secret police. That's because, and it pains me to explain this, the law itself doesn't define evil. It has to be carefully crafted to stop what we already consider evil. Again, usually horrible harm to conscious beings. Saying you need a law for something to be evil is so backward, Koukl's just setting his collar up to fail.
Yes. Okay, so you're an atheist. Tell me where those laws come from. I'm trying to make sense of your worldview. Now, notice, Ross, what I'm doing here, now I'm shifting the burden from the Christian worldview. Because in our worldview, we can make sense of evil. It's a broken world. Evil is when people disobey God.
I guess you can choose to define evil that way, but it's not going to be a very useful definition. It's no less arbitrary than defining evil as causing horrible harm to conscious beings, and just as in my example with laws, if disobeying God doesn't align with my definition, people will be ill at ease with it, and even Christians will notice the problem and try to reconcile them. So why not just use my definition to begin with? It's basically what people deep down mean by evil anyway.
Now, why he allows that's a question that can be answered. That's a separate issue.
Yeah, and according to your hypothetical conversation, it's the issue the atheist originally brought up. So why would you ignore it and change the subject to something else, then act incredulous because what they said is different from the tangent you went on?
The point I'm making is evil makes sense in our worldview. Our whole story is about the problem of evil and how it gets solved.
So apparently it makes sense for a problem like evil to exist in a world created by a tri-omni God who designed literally everything that exists from scratch out of his own imagination. Apparently it makes sense that this same God, who as described by Christians should be able to blink any problem out of existence with a thought, needed to solve this problem, which he created by choice in the first place, through weird rituals that include blood exiting the body of a deceased creature. Yeah, makes sense.
But what about his worldview?
Yeah, what about our worldview? By contrast, we atheists need to explain why we use the word evil to describe horrible harm done to conscious beings. Ooh, huge challenge for us.
So they're saying that Christianity is stupid.
Well, at least you're saying that they're saying it. Behind their backs where they can't clarify.
Irrational because of the problem of evil, but the problem of evil makes sense in our world. What it doesn't make sense is the atheist world. And this is why, on this issue, I'm asking the question in this particular way, okay? I'm asking the question, okay, let's just say you're right, there is no God. But those things still happen, right? And they're still evil, right? Okay, so tell me, where are you getting your standard that judges those things as evil? Where does that come from?
It comes from our almost universal observation that certain things cause distress to living beings, and from the fact that we almost as universally don't like seeing that distress inflicted upon ourselves or others. I'd be so bold as to say that's where your idea of evil comes from too, which is why you generally need your arbitrary sense of what God commands to agree with it.
Now, there's the problem they're going to face is there is no answer.
It's dangerous to say other people will never have an answer to a point you're making, especially since one of them might give that answer in a recorded response before you say it.
I know what many of them will say. Many of them are going to say, well, we evolved these ideas. But when they tell me they evolved the ideas, I have another question, because I know they just made a mistake. This is what it took labored painfully to make clear in the book, and hopefully when it comes out next year, it'll be clear to people who read it. The question is, then I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. I thought you said there's evil out there in the world.
No, there's not evil out there in the world any more than there's tallness out there in the world. Greg's doing exactly what I said he'd do, which is conflating the abstract idea we describe as evil with some kind of literal entity.
Those things are actually evil. Yes. How can evolution make some act evil in itself? That's the question.
It doesn't. And if you think it does, you're misunderstanding both evolution and what people mean when they say our sense of morality arose from it.
See, all evolution can do is make me believe they're evil, but that's all it is. It's just my belief.
And all theism can do is give us another being who believes something is evil. It's almost like evil isn't a thing that any worldview can conjure into existence.
So that I can get my genes into the next generation or something like that.
Oh, Greg, try not to be so basic.
But biology can't
Right.
make anything bad. It can only make us believe things are bad for some evolutionary purpose. So it turns out that all evolution can do is a relativistic morality, and internal morality. It can't make the outside things bad. These are the kinds of questions that I'm going to press my atheist friends on, who, when I ask them what's stupid about Christianity, what's irrational about believing in God, and they say things like that, I say, okay, you help me to understand how you make sense of the evil you're complaining about, given your atheistic materialism. It fits in my world.
Right.
How does it fit in your world?
It fits in the Christian worldview in just as arbitrary and intangible ways it fits in mine. The difference is, and I get tired of reiterating this, that your concept actually needs to agree with mine. I don't care whether harm caused to humans offends your concept of God. However, you need to ensure that your idea of God doesn't like horrible harm to humans. So your entire boast about your worldview making sense is just totally empty. But the more relevant thing within the context of this conversation is that it's a flagrant and obnoxious change in subject. By asking how God can allow evil, the atheist is posing a question about the internal logic of Christianity. That being, if the Christian idea of God doesn't want grievous harm to come to people and he's all-powerful, then why does he allow it? This question doesn't at all depend on what the atheist considers evil, even setting aside the fact that Koukl's argument on that point is totally vapid. It's just asking Christians to reconcile what they believe God would want with what he seems to allow. Now, of course, some of the power of this argument is in the fact that humanity as a whole generally hates horrible, unjustified harm. But what does God have to do with that trait of humans or its power over our behavior? It's silly. Basically, to sum up, Greg responded to his caller by playing along with and in fact inflaming his unflattering perceptions of his friends before suggesting that really bad arguments would own them. It flies in the face of even the most basic qualified advice on how to talk to friends you disagree with, and seems almost designed to promote the kind of insular thinking that will drive a wedge between Christians and others and encourage them to process their frustration by buying apologetics books. There we go. This program was made possible by a grant from John Adams, Bob Generic, Maggie Danger, S.R. Foxley, Daniel Bostedt, Magnus Holmgren, and Q, and by the generous support of viewers like you. If you'd like to join them in pledging to this channel, please find a link to the Prophet of Zod Patreon below.